The crystal glass shattered against the marble floor, its sound echoing through the cavernous mansion like a scream of despair. Ethan Caldwell, once hailed as one of the youngest self-made millionaires in America, stood trembling in the ruins of his own fury. At just 32, he had conquered the world of technology investments, turning a modest inheritance into a multi-billion-dollar empire. Yet none of his fortune could buy back what mattered most. His wife, Claire, had been taken from him in a tragic accident 3 years earlier, and his only son, Matthew, now sat motionless in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. That night, Ethan knelt beside Matthew, who had watched the outburst in silence. "It's okay, Dad. I don't mind the chair," the boy whispered with a quiet strength that pierced Ethan's heart. How could his son be so brave when he himself was drowning in hopelessness? 15. Doctors, endless flights across continents, cutting-edge treatments in Switzerland, Germany, Japan. Nothing had worked. The final verdict was always the same: no recovery, no miracle. By now, Ethan had spent over $580 million, chasing hope that dissolved like sand between his fingers. The mansion that once brimmed with laughter and light had become a mausoleum of grief. Every room echoed with absence. The great halls, the chandeliers, the polished marble, none of it could silence the memory of Claire's radiant smile, frozen forever in the portrait above the fireplace. She had dreamed of seeing Matthew run across soccer fields, dance at school, recitals, and grow into the man she always believed he could be. Those dreams had been shattered in an instant, crushed by twisted metal on a rain-slick street. Ethan often found himself bargaining in prayer, offering everything he owned, his company, his wealth, even his own life, if only Matthew could walk again. But heaven remained silent, and the silence was unbearable. Surrounded by billions, he was poorer than he had ever been, because he could not heal his son. That night, staring at the broken glass at his feet, Ethan finally understood the cruel truth. Sometimes the greatest tragedy is realizing that all the power and money in the world cannot mend what love alone cannot reach. The doorbell rang sharply, its chime slicing through the stillness of the Caldwell mansion. Ethan Caldwell, weary from another sleepless night spent combing through medical journals. He no longer believed in, hesitated before answering. He expected another courier with flowers he didn't want, or some glossy envelope full of sympathy he could not bear to read. But when he opened the heavy oak door, he was met with something wholly unexpected. Something that would change everything. On the porch stood Mrs. Holloway, his elderly neighbor, her frail frame wrapped tightly in a winter coat. Her hands trembled as she held onto 2 children clinging desperately to her sides. The girl could not have been more than 8 years old. Her dark hair was tangled. Her coat too thin for the biting wind, yet her eyes held a clarity and dignity far beyond her years. Clutching her hand was a tiny boy, perhaps 2 years old, with wide, fearful brown eyes that searched Ethan's face as though weighing whether he could be trusted. "I'm so sorry to trouble you, Mr. Caldwell," Mrs. Holloway said, her voice breaking. "But their grandmother passed suddenly last night. I found them alone in that crumbling apartment on 5th Street. Social services won't arrive until Monday, and She trailed off, looking helpless. "My arthritis, my small apartment. I simply cannot care for them." The little girl lifted her chin, speaking before Ethan could respond. "Please, sir. We just need somewhere safe tonight. I take care of my brother. We won't be any trouble. I promise." Ethan stood frozen, staring at the children on his doorstep. For 3 years, his mansion had been nothing but a shrine to grief, his son's laughter silenced, his own heart buried beneath failure and regret. Yet in that moment, with the girl's steady gaze fixed on him, he felt something stir deep within him. A flicker. A reminder of the same fierce protectiveness he felt for Matthew. Without thinking, he stepped aside. "Come in." By morning, Ethan discovered the children in his garden. The October sun painted the sprawling grounds in shades of gold, and dew still clung to the grass. Matthew sat in his wheelchair, his face alight with something Ethan hadn't seen in months: joy. And beside him sat the girl, cross-legged in the grass, showing him how to fold fallen leaves into little boats. "I'm Lily," she said when Ethan approached. "And this is my brother, Thomas." The toddler squealed with delight, tossing leaves into the air as though they were confetti. Ethan was astonished. Matthew, who had refused to smile for nearly a year, was giggling freely as Lily guided his clumsy hands through the steps of folding a leaf. Each time his attempt fell apart, she started over patiently, never showing frustration. "It's okay," she told him with quiet assurance. Mama always said the best things take practice, like walking or tying your shoes, or making people smile. Something inside Ethan shifted at those words. For years, he had drowned himself in sterile hospital rooms and endless consultations, chasing medical miracles that slipped further away with each passing month. But here, in the simplest of gestures, folding leaves, telling stories, making Matthew laugh, this child was achieving what no doctor, no therapist, no billion-dollar clinic had managed. She was bringing hope back into his son's eyes. That evening, the sound of laughter drifted down the marble corridors. Ethan followed it to the living room, where Lily was reading Goodnight Moon to both boys. She gave each character its own exaggerated voice, sending Matthew into fits of giggles, while little Thomas clapped his tiny hands. Ethan stood in the doorway, transfixed. For the first time in years, the sick house no longer felt like a mausoleum. It was alive again. Days turned into weeks, and Lily transformed the mansion in ways Ethan could never have predicted. She woke early to prepare fancy toast, a recipe her mother had once made. Simple bread with butter, cinnamon, and sugar, cut into neat triangles. She invented games for Matthew that turned his wheelchair into a pirate ship sailing across stormy seas. She organized treasure hunts through the hallways, crafted fairy houses in the garden, and told stories where the heroes always found a way to win. Most astonishing of all, she reminded Matthew that joy was still possible. He began to look forward to mornings again, eager to see what new adventure Lily had prepared. His laughter echoed through the halls. He worked harder at his therapy sessions, motivated not by doctors, but by the promise of playing with his new friend. Ethan, who had once dreaded coming home, now rushed back from business meetings, just to catch a glimpse of the three children, sprawled on the carpet building block towers or inventing their own fairy tales. One crisp November morning, Lily announced with mischievous certainty, "Today, we're going to dance." Ethan nearly protested, the familiar ache rising at the word. Matthew couldn't dance, not anymore. But Lily silenced him with the wisdom of a child who believed in the impossible. Dancing isn't about feet. It's about feeling music in your heart. She set a speaker in the center of the room, playing soft jazz, the kind Claire had once loved. She took Matthew's hands and whispered, "Close your eyes. Feel it in your arms, your shoulders, your smile." Slowly, Matthew's body began to sway, guided by Lily's own graceful movements. Ethan watched, his chest tightening. His wife had dreamed of teaching their son to dance. Now, impossibly, it was happening through this little girl who had arrived on his doorstep by chance. From that day forward, everything began to change. Lily's presence wove healing into the fabric of their daily lives. Thomas, once timid and silent, now laughed freely, toddling after Matthew's wheelchair with unshakable devotion. Matthew, once resigned to despair, began to rediscover himself, his joy, his determination, even his courage. And Ethan, once convinced his life was nothing but tragedy, found himself daring to believe again. It was not doctors or billions that had given them this gift. It was the courage of an 8-year-old girl, who carried dignity in her small shoulders and hope in her voice. Lily had brought life back to a broken family, teaching them the simplest and deepest truth: that healing often arrives not through wealth or power, but through love, presence, and the innocence of a child. The mansion, once a hollow echo of grief, was slowly awakening. Where silence and sorrow had reigned, the laughter of children now spilled into the hallways, weaving itself into every corner of the Caldwell estate. It was a laughter that Ethan thought he would never hear again, the light, unrestrained joy of his son, Matthew. And the catalyst for it all was Lily, the little girl who had arrived at his door like a miracle dressed in worn clothes. Every morning, Matthew waited eagerly for Lily to appear. She would rush into his room, her hair a wild halo, Thomas trailing close behind with a giggle, and the three of them would dive into a new adventure. One day, she turned his wheelchair into a pirate ship, christening him Captain Caldwell and handing him a paper sword. The next, she transformed the living room into a castle under siege, where Matthew defended the throne with blocks and blankets while Thomas played the mischievous dragon. Ethan often stood in the doorway, unseen, watching his son come alive. The boy who had once withdrawn into silence now grinned with every fiber of his being, his blue eyes so like Claire sparkling with life again. Lily had a gift for meeting Matthew where he was, never pitying him, never treating him as less. When his clumsy hands struggled with folding paper, or stacking blocks. She didn't scold or sigh. She simply guided him gently, offering patience that most adults couldn't muster. But the moment that transformed everything came on an ordinary November morning. Lily announced it with the absolute certainty only a child could carry. "Today, we're going to dance." Ethan nearly protested, his instinct to shield Matthew from disappointment rising sharp and fast. Dance was the word that haunted him. Claire had loved to dance ballet, jazz, even silly swing steps in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. She had dreamed of passing that love down to their son. Now the very idea felt like a cruel reminder of what could never be. But Lily silenced him with a shake of her head. "Dancing isn't about your feet," she told Matthew, her tone as serious as a teacher's. "It's about your heart. Everyone can dance if they let the music move them." She fetched a small speaker from the corner, dusty from years of neglect. Ethan recognized it instantly. It was the one Claire had used, still holding the last playlist she had made. When the first notes of soft jazz filled the air, Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Lily placed her small hands gently over Matthew's. "Close your eyes," she whispered. "Don't think about the chair. Feel the music in your arms, in your smile, in your chest." Slowly, she swayed his upper body, guiding him in gentle motions, letting his shoulders loosen and his head tilt to the rhythm. Then she spun gracefully around him, her movements light and free, creating a dance that didn't exclude him but celebrated him. Matthew's face lit up with wonder. His laughter bubbled out, pure and unrestrained, as he moved with her. In that moment, he wasn't a boy confined to a wheelchair, he was a child, dancing, fully and joyfully alive. Ethan stood in the doorway, gripping the frame, his heart breaking and mending all at once. He thought of Claire, of her dream to teach their son to dance, and realized with aching clarity that her dream was still alive. Reborn in this little girl who had somehow carried hope into their broken home. "Mr. Caldwell," Lily called, still moving to the music. "You have to dance too. Thomas and I need partners." And Matthew's already dancing with the music. For a moment, Ethan hesitated, his carefully built walls of grief holding him back. But then, Thomas clapped his tiny hands and squealed with delight, and Ethan found himself stepping forward. Awkwardly at first, then more freely, he swayed to the rhythm, lifting Thomas into his arms as the toddler bounced and giggled. Together, the four of them filled the mansion with music and laughter, turning it into a place of joy once more. Later that night, as Ethan tucked Matthew into bed, the boy reached for his father's hand. "Dad," he whispered, his eyes glowing. "Lily makes everything better. She makes me forget. I'm different. Can she stay forever?" Ethan pressed a kiss to his son's forehead, his heart caught between fear and hope. "We'll see, buddy. We'll see." Over the following weeks, Lily continued to weave herself into the fabric of their lives. She cooked fancy toast in the mornings, helped Matthew with schoolwork, and invented countless games that kept the house alive with noise and creativity. Thomas, once shy and clinging, began to toddle with confidence, his laughter echoing through rooms that had been tombs of silence. But more than anything, Lily taught Ethan something he had forgotten, that healing wasn't always about curing what was broken. Healing was about presence, about laughter in the midst of pain, about finding ways to dance, even when you couldn't move your feet. For years, Ethan had believed his wealth could solve anything, that there was a doctor, a treatment, a miracle hidden somewhere in the world that could buy his son's happiness back. But here was an 8-year-old girl, with no money, no credentials, and no training, accomplishing what billions never could. She wasn't healing Matthew's body, but she was healing his spirit. And in doing so, she was healing Ethan's as well. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Ethan wandered into Claire's old art studio. He hadn't entered in 3 years, unable to face the unfinished canvas still resting on the easel, a family portrait she had been painting when she died. For the first time, the sight didn't crush him. Instead, it filled him with gratitude. Claire had dreamed of a family full of laughter and love. Though the shape of it had changed, that dream was alive again. Ethan whispered into the quiet room. "You'd love her, Claire. You'd love them both. They've saved us." And as he turned out the light, he realized that the miracle he had spent $580 million searching for had been here all along. Not in hospitals, not in sterile labs, not in doctors' hands, but in the small, steady presence of love. The knock at the door was sharp and unyielding, the kind of sound that carried authority. When Ethan opened it, a woman in a gray suit stood in the foyer, clipboard in hand, her expression grave. She introduced herself as Patricia Halford, the state social worker assigned to Lily and Thomas's case. Her eyes swept the marble floors and towering ceilings of the 6th Caldwell mansion with an air of skepticism, as though wealth itself were an accusation. "Mr. Caldwell," she said briskly, "I appreciate the kindness you've shown these children, but temporary placements have limits. They need stability, structure, and proper parental oversight. We already have a family in Buffalo interested in adopting siblings. They've been thoroughly vetted. Experienced foster parents. 3 successful adoptions. A proven record of TinenandFortive.com. Stability." The words struck Ethan like a blow. Buffalo. 6 hours away. He imagined the house emptying again, Matthew's laughter vanishing, as suddenly as it had returned, Lily and Thomas packed into a stranger's car. His chest tightened with panic. Before he could answer, Lily appeared at the top of the grand staircase, her small frame somehow commanding the room. She held Thomas's hand as if to steady them both. "We are stable here," she said softly but firmly. "Tommy hasn't had a nightmare since we came. He used to wake up screaming for Mama every night, but now he sleeps until morning. Matthew laughs again. And Mr. Caldwell makes us pancakes on Sundays. That feels like family to me." Patricia's professional mask flickered, but she shook her head. "Lucy," she began, mistakenly using the girl's file name before correcting herself. "Lily, you're 8 years old. It's not your responsibility to measure the emotional well-being of an entire household. You need school, consistency, and guardians with experience." "I teach her," Matthew interjected, wheeling himself into the foyer with determination. "Dad got us workbooks and games. Lily's really smart. She reads chapter books, and she helps me with therapy exercises too. She's already part of our family." Patricia jotted notes, her pen scratching across the clipboard. "Mr. Caldwell," she said at last, "if you wish to pursue adoption, you'll need to file a formal petition. Until then, my orders are clear. Tomorrow morning, the children will be prepared to transition to the Buffalo family. The sooner it's done, the less traumatic it will be." Ethan's voice hardened, carrying the steel that had once closed billion-dollar deals. "Number I won't allow them to be uprooted again. They've been through enough loss. They belong here." That night, he paced his study like a caged animal while his lawyers worked furiously over conference calls. Adoption law was complex, and his status as a single father with a disabled child made the system suspicious of his motives. "Money works against you in these cases," his lawyer Jonathan Reeves warned. "They fear wealthy men treat children like accessories. The state will argue that you can't replace hands-on parenting with resources." Upstairs, Lily sat between Matthew and Thomas, reading Where the Wild Things Are. Though her voice was steady, Ethan saw how tightly she clutched her brother's hand. Later, when the boys had drifted to sleep, she lingered in the hallway. "Mr. Caldwell," she whispered, her dark eyes heavy with worry, "I promised Mama I'd always take care of Tommy. I can't let them take him away from me." Kneeling, Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And I promised Matthew I wouldn't let this family be torn apart again. Tomorrow, we fight together." The next morning, Ethan strode into Judge Morrison's courtroom with Jonathan at his side. Lily, dressed in a simple blue dress she had chosen herself, sat between Matthew and Thomas, in the front row. Ethan's heart pounded harder than it had in any boardroom. Millions had once hung on his decisions, but nothing compared to what was at stake now. "Your Honor," Jonathan began, "we request emergency guardianship to prevent unnecessary separation. These children have found stability and healing in my client's home. To remove them now would cause irreparable harm." Patricia rose, her voice crisp and firm. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell is a single parent already, managing the demands of a child with significant disabilities. Adding 2 more children with trauma backgrounds would be reckless. Money cannot substitute for parental experience or emotional stability." Judge Morrison, a woman with silver hair and sharp, discerning eyes, turned to Lily. "Before I decide, I'd like to hear from the child herself." A hush fell as Lily walked to the witness stand, her small shoes clicking against the marble. Sworn in, she folded her hands neatly, her gaze steady on the judge. "Lily," the judge said gently, "can you tell me what your life has been like living with Mr. Caldwell?" Lily took a breath, her voice clear. "He makes us breakfast every morning. Real breakfast, not just cereal. Tommy has his own room with a star nightlight, because he's afraid of the dark. Matthew teaches me math, and I teach him how to make bracelets and silly songs. Mr. Caldwell hugs us goodnight and reads with funny voices. We're not broken anymore. We're healing. We're a real family. And before? The judge asked quietly. Lily's voice softened, but she didn't falter. With Grandma, we tried. But she was sick. Her hands shook, and she couldn't lift Tommy. Sometimes we didn't have much food. I took care of him the best I could. He cried a lot because he missed Mama. But now, he laughs every day. And Matthew isn't sad like before. Mr. Caldwell smiles again, too. A hush filled the room. Even Patricia discreetly dabbed at her eyes. Judge Morrison leaned forward. And what do you think would happen if you and your brother had to leave? Lily's voice trembled but held steady. Tommy would be scared again. He might stop talking. Like after Mama died. Matthew would be lonely. And Mr. Caldwell, he would go back to being sad. But here, we help each other. We're family because we choose to be. Silence pressed down like a weight. Finally, the judge nodded, her eyes moist. Emergency. Guardianship is granted for 90 days. Formal adoption proceedings will begin immediately. Weekly reports will monitor progress. But this family will not be separated without compelling cause. The gavel struck, and Ethan felt his knees weaken. Relief and joy surged through him as Matthew cheered, Thomas clapped, and Lily slipped her hand into his. Does this mean we get to stay? She whispered. Ethan knelt, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, sweetheart. You're mine now. All of you. From the moment you walked into this house, you were my children. Today, the world finally agrees. Snow fell softly as they left the courthouse, blanketing the city in white. For Ethan, it felt like a fresh canvas, a beginning not bought with wealth, but carved from love, courage, and the simple truth spoken by an 8-year-old girl. Families are not just born. They are chosen, built, and fought for. And he would fight for this one forever. The months following the court's decision brought a fragile peace to the Caldwell household. Ethan devoted himself fully to his children, because that's what Lily and Thomas had become to him, his children. The mansion, once a mausoleum of grief, now rang with laughter and playful chaos. Matthew was more determined in his therapy than ever, inspired by Lily's encouragement and Thomas's boundless joy. For the first time since Claire's death, Ethan dared to believe that his family had been restored, even if it looked different from the one he had once imagined. But peace is rarely permanent. The first tremor came in the form of a phone call from Jonathan Reeves, his attorney. Ethan, we have a problem, Jonathan said, his tone heavy. Lily and Thomas's biological father has resurfaced. His name is James Monroe. He's recently been released from prison and is petitioning the court to restore his parental rights. Ethan felt his blood run cold. That's impossible. Lily told me he was gone, that he was never truly part of their lives. Apparently, he signed away his rights years ago while battling addiction. Now he's claiming he was coerced, and he wants another chance. He's hired counsel. The courts will have to hear him out. When Ethan ended the call, he turned to find Lily in the doorway. Her dark eyes, always so quick to read the room, were fixed on him. Someone's trying to take us away again, aren't they? She whispered. Ethan's heart ached. He pulled her close. There might be another fight ahead, sweetheart. But listen to me, no matter what happens, we'll face it together. You're my family. That will never change. A week later, James Monroe appeared in person. From Ethan's study window, he watched a gaunt man pacing the driveway, his nervous energy betraying both hope and resentment. When the doorbell rang, his voice crackled through the intercom. I know my kids are in there. I've got rights. I'm clean now. I've got a job. They belong with me. Inside, Lily froze, her face draining of color. She clutched Thomas protectively and pulled him behind the curtains. That's him, she whispered, trembling. That's James. He used to make Mama cry. He'd come home angry and loud, and we'd hide in the bedroom until he left. Ethan knelt beside her, his voice calm but resolute. You're safe here. He doesn't come inside. Unless I allow it. And I won't. The custody hearing was scheduled for June. The weeks leading up to it were grueling. Psychological evaluations, home visits, probing interviews. Dr. Sarah Chen, a court-appointed psychologist, spent hours with Lily and Thomas. Her findings painted a clear picture. The children had formed deep attachments to Ethan and Matthew, and removing them now would cause serious emotional harm. Still, the law had to balance biology against the best interests of the child. On the morning of the hearing, Ethan found Lily in the kitchen, dressed in her best navy blue dress with small white flowers. She handed him a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this last night," she said quietly. "In case I forget what to say." Ethan unfolded it. In her careful handwriting were the words that nearly undid him. "A real dad doesn't just give you DNA. A real dad teaches you you're brave, makes you feel safe enough to dream, and loves your little brother as much as you do. Please don't make us leave our real family. We've already lost too much." He had to excuse himself to the bathroom to collect himself before they left. The courtroom was packed. James Monroe sat across the aisle, fidgeting under the gaze of the judge. His lawyer painted him as a man reborn. Sober for 14 months, steadily employed, desperate to prove that people could change. "I know I wasn't there before," James said, his voice trembling. "Addiction is a disease. But I'm better now. I just want a chance to be the father I couldn't be." When cross-examined, cracks appeared. James couldn't remember Thomas's birthday. He faltered when asked about Lily's favorite book. He admitted he hadn't seen them in more than 3 years. The courtroom murmured as Ethan's attorney pressed further. "Mr. Monroe, during those years, your children lived in poverty with their ailing grandmother. You sent only 200 total. Is that your definition of providing?" James lowered his head, unable to answer. Then it was Lily's turn. She walked to the stand with a quiet dignity that silenced the room. "James is my biological father," she said calmly. "But Mr. Caldwell is my real dad. He makes breakfast every morning. He taught me it's okay to ask for help. He loves Thomas like I do. He doesn't yell. He doesn't make me feel scared. He makes me feel safe." Her voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. "If we had to leave, Tommy would be scared all the time again. Matthew would be lonely. And Mr. Caldwell would be sad. But we're healing each other now. We're a real family. Families aren't just blood. Families are people who choose to love you every day." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of James quietly weeping at the defense table. Even the social worker dabbed her eyes. After recess, James approached Ethan in the hallway. His shoulders sagged, his voice stripped of bravado. "They're incredible kids. Lucy Lily, she's got her mother's strength. I missed it all, didn't I? I ruined it." He swallowed hard. "If I withdraw my petition, would you let me see them sometimes? Not as their dad. Just so they know I tried to get better." Ethan studied him. For the first time, he didn't just see the addict who had abandoned 2 children. He saw a broken man who had clawed his way back to sobriety, too late to reclaim the past but not too late to prove he was trying. If that's what Lily wants, and if you can respect boundaries, then yes. She deserves to see that you're still fighting. When court reconvened, James stood with shaking hands. "Your Honor, I withdraw my petition. These children have a good home. A real family. I won't destroy that because of my regrets." The gavel fell, sealing the adoption permanently. Ethan pulled Lily and Thomas into his arms, while Matthew wheeled forward to hug them all. Tears streamed freely, but they were tears of joy, of relief, of victory. As they left the courthouse, snowflakes drifted down, soft against Lily's hair. She tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Dad, was it the right choice? To let him see us sometimes?" Ethan knelt to her level. "What do you think, sweetheart?" She considered, then nodded slowly. "I think everyone deserves a chance to be better. But he's not my dad anymore. You are. You always will be." In that moment, Ethan realized that while wealth had once given him power, it was love that gave him purpose. And now, in the eyes of the law, and in the hearts of his children, he was no longer just a grieving millionaire. He was a father chosen, trusted, and loved. Seasons turned, and with them, the Caldwell home blossomed into something unrecognizable. From the cold mausoleum it had once been. What was once filled with silence and shadows, now pulsed with warmth, laughter, and the vibrant noise of family life. The walls that had echoed grief were now covered with drawings, photographs, and medals, tangible proof of the extraordinary transformation taking place inside. Matthew, once resigned to a life of quiet despair, discovered a new fire within him. Encouraged daily by Lily's unshakable faith and Thomas's boundless cheer, he poured his energy into physical therapy. What began as tentative transfers from his wheelchair to a bench grew into something greater. With dedication, he developed the strength to race in a specialized wheelchair, his determination turning into a passion. The boy who once hated therapy now thrived on challenge, and soon he was competing and winning at junior wheelchair racing events. His smile at the finish line was brighter than any gold medal could ever be. Ethan watched in awe as his son reclaimed his confidence, not through medicine or miracles, but through grit and the love of those who believed in him. For the first time in years, Matthew didn't see himself as broken, he saw himself as unstoppable. Lily, too, was blossoming. The frightened 8-year-old, who had once clutched her brother's hand with the weight of the world on her shoulders, grew into a remarkable young girl filled with intelligence and quiet authority. Her natural leadership shone as she organized family routines, tutored Thomas in his letters, and even helped Matthew structure his training. Teachers praised her at school for her brilliance, but it was her compassion and resilience at home that truly defined her. Ethan often marveled at her ability to balance childhood joy with wisdom beyond her years. She was, in every sense, the glue that bound their family together. And Thomas, the timid toddler who once hid behind Lily's legs, flourished in the safety of Crest, their new home. Surrounded by love, he transformed into a lively, confident boy who greeted every day with curiosity. His vocabulary exploded, his laughter infectious, his little victories celebrated by everyone. He followed Matthew like a shadow, cheered Lily's every accomplishment, and ran to Ethan with unfiltered affection. The scars of his early years faded, replaced by the certainty that he was cherished. For Ethan, the revival of his children breathed life back into him as well. He no longer paced his mansion with grief heavy on his shoulders. Instead, he filled it with traditions. Sunday, pancake breakfasts, evening storytelling, garden races, and movie nights filled with popcorn and blankets. Claire's portrait above the fireplace, once a painful reminder of what he had lost, now felt like a silent blessing over what he had gained. He often imagined she was smiling down on them, proud of the unconventional but beautiful family they had become. The Caldwell estate, once a place of isolation, became a sanctuary of love. Neighbors and friends often remarked on the transformation, how the cold walls now radiated warmth, how the children's laughter carried into the streets. Inside, the family had created a world rooted not in wealth or power but in loyalty, joy, and chosen love. Ethan often found himself reflecting at night, standing in the doorway of his children's rooms. Watching Matthew's steady breathing after a long day of training, Lily bent over a book with determination, and Thomas curled up with his stuffed rabbit. Ethan understood something profound. Healing had not come from money or medicine. It had come from family, the kind forged through courage, love, and the decision to never give up on one another. And in that truth, he finally found peace. Ethan Caldwell once believed miracles could be bought. He had spent hundreds of millions chasing doctors, clinics, and treatments, desperate to fix what fate had stolen from him. But in the end, the miracle he sought didn't arrive in a hospital or laboratory. It walked through his door in the form of 2 children in need of love. Lily and Thomas didn't heal Matthew's legs, but they healed his spirit. They brought back laughter, courage, and the will to fight for life. More importantly, they healed Ethan's heart, reminding him that family isn't defined by bloodlines or legal documents. It is built through the daily choice to love, to protect, and to stand together no matter the cost. The mansion that once echoed with emptiness now thrived with warmth. Ethan realized that the true wealth of a man isn't measured in fortune or power, but in the bonds he shares with those who depend on him. Love had given him more than medicine ever could. It had given him a family. Sometimes, we search everywhere for miracles, believing they lie in money, status, or expertise. But the greatest miracle is often right in front of us, in the people who love us, in the bonds we nurture, in the choice to never give up on one another. Family is not just inherited, it is chosen, built, and lived every single day. What about you? Do you believe family is defined by blood or by love? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us for more powerful stories of love, resilience, and hope.